We
Once
back,
again,
gentlemen.
ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it once again. We are never thirsty. We are here live, bringing you the latest in non-desperation chatter. Here at Never Thirsty, we believe always to stay hydrated. I'm Stu Stone. Always stay hydrated. I always carry a beverage with me, usually a peach Snapple, sometimes a vitamin water, but I always have a drink with me wherever I go. I bring a drink with me to dinner parties, to special occasions, to not so special occasions. I don't show up somewhere unless I am comfortably aware of the fact that I will never be thirsty, and you do not want to be thirsty, folks, because that is a sign of desperation.
That's
And it's
very
so
true.
easy to avoid. With me is the Thirsty, Neffy Neff, the last, not the first, well, maybe one of the first, but the
What's up,
last
fellas?
B-boy, the last American B-boy. Neff, how are you, man?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I can't complain. Can you guys hear me
And
with the
you, of
mic is
course,
like
are,
this?
yeah, no, I can hear you.
Okay.
And you are in the New York, you're in New York right now, right?
I am for limited time only.
You're in New York for a limited time, like McRib, for
That's right.
limited time only.
Exactly.
And
Very limited.
and joining us from Dusseldorf, as always, the very bizarre one, a producer in his own right, and a guy that is making quite a name for himself in the world of hip hop music. The wonderful Wire Fang.
What's good, fam? What's good? Big up,
What's up, Wire Fang?
big up, big up.
How's Dusseldorf?
Dusseldorf is good. I'm at Cafe Extrablatt in Dusseldorf, chilling. I'm right next door. I just ordered my burger. I'm chilling.
How do you
Making
eat or
beats.
Good.
drink the burger? How you gonna eat or
Yeah,
drink?
that's
Not drink the burger, but
With the straw.
okay.
How do you eat a burger?
So yeah, with his mouth in his hands.
Thank you. Thank you very
I would
much.
hope so.
Yes. Thank
Now
you.
you were in New York. Let's talk about something that went. Let's talk about something that went down in New York recently. There was
I already
another one
know.
of those.
Mm.
There was another one of those editions of Verses. You weren't expecting me to say that.
Yes, I was.
That had Fat Joe and Ja Rule
Yes.
kick each other. I saw some highlights of it, and I
Hmm.
don't know what to make of it, but it looked like it was a good time for those who were there. So, what do you think of it?
Well, I thought it was awesome to battle. I gotta give it to Ja Rule though, as far as
Really?
Victor. Yeah, I have to. He did his thing. He was the
I mean, these are these are two artists that are very interesting to battle with each other because yes, they were both very popular during a certain period of time, and Fat Joe definitely is still relevant, still putting out
hmm
songs in the last few years that have made it to the top of the charts. So,
hmm
but you're talking about two artists that were overshadowed a lot by guys that were in either with them directly or indirectly. So like Ja Rule, obviously, DMX around the same time, very popular, very similar, sort of not the same artist at all, but there's a comparison to be made with their delivery and their voice.
Yeah.
And of course, Fat Joe was with Big Pun, and so I would say that like Diddy was with Biggie, right? And when Biggie passed away, or when Biggie was killed,
hmm
prematurely,
Yeah.
Puff Daddy became a rapper and sort of like made it work, right? But when Big Pun died, Fat Joe was already a rapper, so maybe he just had an easier transition to be even more of a rapper. You know what I mean? Like Fat
hmm
Joe has some big hits post Big Pun. Lean Back is probably one of the biggest songs of the 21st century, um, amongst others,
They both
right?
had hits. They both,
Yeah,
Ja Rule and Fat Joe had hits, but the only
yeah,
thing is, Ja had the ladies. He has
yeah,
those hits. So
yeah.
he just had a
Shanti
few
songs
more
and
of
stuff,
them that I think
right?
Fat Joe had, and I respect Fat Joe and I respect Ja Rule. But if I had to weigh it out, he had more of the. He could just keep. Ja kept coming with him, coming with him. coming with
What
him.
was the song that Ja Rule had with Jennifer Lopez? Do you remember what song I'm talking about? Maybe it's called
No.
"Always on Time." Is that what it is?
Is that Jennifer Lopez? No. WireFang. Hold on.
I'm always on time. That's not Jennifer Lopez.
No,
I gotta
fam.
look.
This is Shanti.
No.
Oh, that's Ashanti. That's Ashanti. Yeah.
Yeah.
J Lo, Ja Rule. Let's find out because I have a story.
RULE.
Oh, I'm real is the song. I'm real. Remember that
Oh
song?
yeah. That's the record. If you'd have brought J Lo
No.
out,
I'm real. Are you lonely? Say what you want. So here's a funny story about that, real quick, before we get to today's guest. But a friend of mine, Christina Milian, who wrote that track or wrote on that track, she had hit me up saying like, "Hey, you want to come to the studio and like write with me on a song?" Are you guys still there?
yeah, I hear you.
Oh, you hear me? Because you guys are frozen.
Oh.
She said, "Hey, you want to come write with me on a song?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I had an ex-girlfriend at the time, a girlfriend who was like, "No, you're not going to that session." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Who else is going to be there?" And I'm like, "What does it matter?" And she's like, "No, you're not going to that." And so I didn't go to the session.
Wow.
And it turned out to be that song. So maybe it wouldn't have been as good of a song if I came and messed it all up, or maybe it would have been even better.
You would have been on the verses with Ja Rule yesterday or 2 days ago.
Exactly. But yeah, obviously Christina has a huge writing career that people probably don't even realize. But because she's also a reality star and has her own singing career.
Wow.
She was a writer before she was a pop star. She was writing stuff for Jennifer Lopez amongst other artists. So,
And this is a good friend of yours.
yeah, I know her from back in the day. So she's cool.
Oh,
Very
maybe
cool.
she'll be on the show. Christina, we need you on the
I
show.
doubt it, but maybe.
No. I'm putting energy out there.
But yeah, not with that attitude. But yeah, we do have a guest that is going to be joining us. WireFang looks frozen to me, so I don't know what's going on.
Fam, you good. My beats are cold, son.
Oh, his beats are cold. He's got his burger, his straw burger coming. For people who are watching that want to know how to get into this new economy in the music business, there's a new economy.
Yes.
And it's not about necessarily sales anymore. We've established that.
No.
And even, it's a lot to do with merch. We've talked about that with Danny Gez, but even still with like touring slowed down over the last year, like even merch took a hit. But there is one thing that obviously streaming, but there's obviously another sort of way for artists still to make money. And that is to have their songs in movies and television shows. And a lot of people are like, how do you do that? How do I get my song in that? Who do I talk to? What do I do? I want to have my song on a TV show. And our guest today is somebody that has sort of been at the forefront of that, of that movement. Joining us right now, there he is, Mr. Jeff Siegel. Let's welcome him into the conversation here.
Another round.
What's up, boys?
What's up?
How are you, man? I was just talking about like there's a new economy in the music industry. That's actually not that new. It's just new to a lot of people. But with so many different facets of the industry, sort of the well drying up in a lot of ways, one place where people are still cleaning up is a place where you are an expert. And it is, people always wonder about placements and how do songs end up in movies and TV shows, and what is a music supervisor, and what does all this stuff mean? And you're a guy that has been sort of driving that ship for a long time. And even though now people are starting to recognize this is a game you've been playing for many, many years. So it's great to have you, join the conversation here and help people not be desperate in their attempt to make it in the music industry and do it right. So first of all, it's good to see you, man.
Likewise, yeah. Neff, nice to see you.
Good. Always, brother.
Yeah, all you guys. Good to see you. Good to see you.
So how did you get, like, obviously growing up, you had to be a music fan. Like, how did you decide that you were going to like find, how did you manage to like find your way and your role and your lane in the music business?
Well, I started as a musician, played guitar for a long time, was in a band that was signed to Geffen Records. We didn't do anything. We didn't really sell much, but it was after that. What was that? It was a band called the Nymphs from, I doubt any of you guys would remember. I see WireFang going nuts, but I think that that's just, no matter what band I said I was in, I think WireFang would like it. I was in that band for about 3 or 4 years. We made a record. We toured. Like I said, we didn't really make that much of a splash. But after that is when I decided I wanted to be on the other side of the music business because, well, I watched it when I was an artist and I was seeing all these people make money and having careers. I'm like, oh, I get it. You could stay in music and you don't have to be an artist or just only an artist. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, did one of the songs from your band, like, get placed in a show or something? Like, was there a seed that was planted while you were an artist?
You know, we actually had a couple placements in movies. Pet Sematary 2, which I know is a big film for all of you guys, especially WireFang is really into that movie. And another movie called Bad Influence, but that didn't really plant the seed. And back then, putting your music into movies was sort of like low rent. Like, it wasn't the coolest thing in the world because you were like, I don't know if I want to prostitute my music out to support, someone else's vision, like great movies like Pet Sematary 2. I got into sync sort of accidentally. I did A&R for a number of years. That's what I did right after the band broke up. Is I started as a tape listener at Columbia Records, where I would just sit in a room and listen to demo submissions and sort of write yes or no on it. I sort of ended up in sync accidentally, probably close to about 20 years ago. After I'd had a couple of A&R jobs, couldn't get another A&R job. Nobody was hiring me. So I got into sync sort of accidentally because a friend of mine was doing it, and we sort of partnered up. I created this company 18 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, that's pretty awesome, man. And listen, nobody knows more about this world than you now. I mean, you've put in your 10,000 hours, so to speak, and you're the expert. Let's just clear a few things for people who don't know. Everyone says, "Oh, A&R." What does that mean? What does A&R? What does that mean?
Well, A&R,
artist and repertoire.
Yeah, artist and repertoire. Your gig at a record company would be to find talent, sign them, develop them, and then hand a record over to the marketing department. So that's sort of
in a way, almost like if this was a movie business, it's like a producer in a lot of ways.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is sort of the same role, right? Because you're not the director. The director has a direct analogy to the record producer, right? But an A&R person would find the right producer, put them together, like I said, make the album, and once you've made the album, then you hand it over to the marketing department, and they try to sell it.
Sort of like a tastemaker too. It's like a big tastemaker role. You got to sort of be ahead of the curve. There are probably some A&Rs out there that are like the ones that are like, oh, there's a hit on the radio, find me something like that. Like there's probably some of those, but
there's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that, and I don't see it as a bad thing necessarily. I mean, look, the American public likes what it likes when it comes to consuming records, and when you first start doing A&R and you go see a band and they're highly derivative, you think like, I can't sign these guys. They're too derivative of this. But the American public doesn't care about being derivative, right? I mean, they just want good songs, hits, stuff that sounds good on the radio. So you learn to drop that. Tastemaker, a little. you learn your high noble ideas of bringing great art to the American public. that goes.
Oh man.
No, but yes. Look, sometimes you do a little of everything, or you have an A&R department where, look, there's some guys who sign up to straight up mainstream stuff, and that's okay. That's what they do. And then other guys that are maybe looking for more edgier stuff that the public hasn't really, digested yet. So, and as an A&R guy, I mean, I tried to sign all kinds of stuff, metal.
Is there like a band? Is there like a band that like got away, like that you were like, oh, I almost signed Metallica? It's like,
that's a good question. I'd have to think about it. I mean, there are a couple bands that got away. I don't think I have any stories quite as good as like I almost signed Metallica.
right.
And this was a while ago when I was doing A&R. So let me think about it. If I have a good story, I'll tell you. Listen, one of the hardest things about A&R is you're an A&R guy, you have a boss, right? You find something you want to sign, you got to bring it into that boss, and you will always have to sell your boss on this act, because there's no way your boss isn't going to, it's almost like your boss's job is to throw darts at whatever you bring in, right? But you bring in something, and there's, the first thing, Grimace, well, this is you've brought in. It's like, well, no, it's not. So that's your first struggle as an A&R guy. You got to convince your boss to sign this thing. And, you have to have some vision, because you never find an artist, a band that is 100%, that has a bow, wrapped around it. You got to develop it. You got to think like, look, I get it. There's some problems with this band, but they're going to get it. They're going to write that song. They're going to grow. We got to step in now. We're going to help them. It's tough. It's not,
right.
I remember when I was doing it, people from the outside, it's like, oh, great job. You just go find a great band. And it's like, it's a difficult job.
And I would imagine that it's gotten even worse. You're probably lucky to be out of that, because it's probably gotten way worse. I mean, back when you were doing it, there was at least, you would go see bands play live. Bands would submit demos. Now, there's no more demos. Everybody releases their own stuff. There's a million artists releasing a million songs every single day. There's just way more to sift through without like someone curating it or sort of,
It's data probably. They probably look at, instead of you sending in your song, you go to Spotify, see who's doing, see who's doing the best on Spotify, and then that's how the A&Rs grab them and bring them in.
Every A&R department now in the major labels has an analytic guy who is looking for, but look, back when I was doing it, was I was doing it in the 1890s. In the 90s, the 1990s. We would look to see if a local band was getting radio play somewhere. Sometimes those are the bands you sign that you might see them and say, I don't know if this is groundbreaking, what this is, but people are reacting to it. They like it.
Right. That's the main thing. It's like the setting. Like, I went to a show a few years ago to see Billie Eilish. This is before she like blew up, obviously. And she was playing, and I was the oldest person there by about 20 years. It was all like people there, but my friend works with her, and I got tickets, and I went to go check out his act. And it obviously worked out well for him. But you can see when you're there, these kids are going absolutely nuts for this girl, and they know every word to her song, and you can see that something is happening here. And so that was the magic probably in the 90s as well. Like, you'd go to a club and you could see, you look around, how is the room reacting? Are they going crazy for this band? Like, there's a way to sort of say, like, I could scale this, right?
Sure. And sometimes you go see a band and everyone's going crazy, and you think the opposite. You're like, this is some sort of regional thing and I can't scale it. You got to make that guess as well. And then sometimes you go see a band and there's, tumbleweeds blowing through the place, and you think, I think these guys could reach that's why it's a game that's got a lot of variables to it, and I know from the outside it sounds easy because people see the bands, when they're presented to the public, finished product. They've had a couple of years of development, you've had them working, and people sign. Like, of course you would sign that band. That's a great band. You don't understand. When I saw them at a club, I mean, they were like, they had they were playing on tin pans, and they had, so it is a lot more difficult.
Like some of the most popular overnight success bands, I would say, I would venture to put a number of like 90% on this, that 90% of these overnight success bands have been at it for 10 years. It wasn't
over a few nights.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like Maroon 5 was around for a while before they, even their record was out for like a year before it blew up.
And they had they were actually another band called, I don't remember, Cara's Flowers or something like that, who were signed, put a record out, did the thing, didn't do anything, were dropped. And that's all part of the process, right? They kept getting better, writing better, honing their craft, and then put the right record out the right time, got the radio play, and, now they're, a known entity. So, yeah.
So now you're doing this. Now you're doing the syncs. Well, not now. You've been doing it for almost 20 years. So
yes,
basically, let's break down for people, for the layman out there who don't know even what a sync is. A sync, that is, if I'm saying this correctly, a sync is when you hear a song on a television show or a movie or in a commercial. That is called a sync, correct?
Yeah, the sync is short for synchronization or synchronizing to a visual medium. So that is sync. So yeah. I represent music and try to get it into any kind of visual medium, mostly TV and film. That's our bread and butter. But I do advertising, video games, online stuff, the YouTube shorts and things like that. So, yeah, that's go ahead.
How does somebody like, I got to be honest, I watch a lot of TV, and like a lot of songs are like so that get on TV, and I'm like, how did that song get on? So is there like quality control that's like doesn't exist within certain productions, and then other productions are a lot more like, you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes I'm just like, what is this?
Well, I don't know what TV you're watching exactly. Sure, there's quality control across the board. Because the one thing about sync is the first line is the music supervisor, right? That's the first place that your music is going to go to. And if the music supervisor likes it, they're going to bring it in, and probably the director and several producers also have to like it, right? So there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen. Look, I don't know. Most of the supervisors I work with, I think, are great, have great taste, and in some ways, the music supervisors are, cooler than I don't know, the radio stations or whatever, because they'll play stuff that isn't straight up commercial, right? I mean, they're serving an emotion and a visual. They're not trying to make a radio programmer in, wherever, North Carolina happy, right? So in a lot of ways, you'll hear more adventurous stuff, Like I said, I don't know what you're hearing, why you feel so crappy.
Have you ever seen the show? Have you seen the show Nathan For You? Do you know that show?
What is it called?
Nathan For You. Do you know that show, Nathan For You?
Nathan For You. Is that what you said? Because you're kind of you're sort of buffering a little bit. I thought you said Naked For You at first, and I was going to say that's a whole different vibe.
That's a different vibe. No, Nathan For You is a show that was on Comedy Central. A comedian named Nathan Fielder, and he purposely picks the worst songs to put on his show. Like, it's part of the creative is to have bad, sort of like cheesy songs from indescript artists on his show. But it's not all like that. Is there examples of artists that you can think of that sort of broke having their song placed? I mean, there's got to be, for sure, in the 2006 to 2012 MTV era, there's probably, a band had a song on one of those The Hills or something
Yeah, no.
grew up,
There's a number of artists, and I'm probably not going to be able to remember anybody's name, just because I deal with so many artists. But there were a number of artists that, I mean, look, one of the things in breaking a record, when I was working at a record company, the marketing department will always tell you it's multiple impressions that break a band. Not one thing's going to do it. So if you can get a good placement, combined with radio play, maybe some advertising, maybe you were getting on MTV when they had music, you combine that together. But there are certainly artists that have. Apple commercials at one point were amazing for artists. Like if you were a new artist and you got in one of those commercials, it was a great marketing device. Sure. Amazing. Again, I'll try to think if I can think of somebody where sync is really what broke their career. But I don't know. Nothing comes.
But syncs definitely break their bank account, because like the right sync can come along and you can actually make a lot of money doing syncs.
You can. There's probably less money than people think overall, but there is definitely money to be made there. And there's back end royalties to TV, television, and film, to the extent that when it gets on television. So there's sort of two revenue sources that will come: the upfront fee, and then the back end royalties that you would get from ASCAP or BMI, CSAC.
Right.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Now I'm a new artist, brand new. I want to get into the sync business. I want to meet someone. What is your role? Are you an agent, or tell me the step by step for me to start to meet someone like you and to get to the finish line? And how much can an artist potentially make?
Okay. So, yeah, if you're an independent artist and you want to get in, to the sync game, there's two ways to do it. One is you can start, reaching out and trying to get to supervisors and see if you can get your music to them. Yeah, I'm a rep. I'm an agent. So I find artists and I go and rep them. And my job is to try to pitch them to the music supervisors, get them into TV and film. I think at this point in the game, like maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, as an independent artist, you could reach out to the music supervisors. But at this point, because everybody, hang on a second, I think they're, you know what, guys? I don't know if you can hear that. I got to go. They found me. No, sorry. Sometimes it gets loud. I think the way to go right now for artists would be to hook up with someone like me, because I represent a couple hundred artists, right? So when a music supervisor comes to me, they can get a lot of music. Whereas if they're dealing with an individual artist, all they get is your 5 songs or 10 songs or whatever you have to offer. And it's just hard to get to a supervisor these days. If you're an independent artist, it's just hard to get their attention. And most networks and entertainment companies won't license with independent artists directly. They want some representation because, they've been burned by independent artists not knowing all the things they need to do a, proper license.
Clearing a sample, or not, a songwriter not credited properly, and then all of a sudden the network gets hit up like, hey, what's this? I'm sure that happens all the time.
Right.
It happens a lot. So part of what we do, besides try to get placements for our artists, is we vet the artists that we represent. Tell us everybody who's written here. Are there samples? Tell us everything we need to know, so that, because the one thing about sync is, if you're an artist and you put something up on Spotify and let's say you had an uncleared sample in it, you might be able to make a deal, or they might ask you to pull it off Spotify, right? But I deal with Disney and NBC and ABC. These are big entertainment companies, right? And, they don't want to sync an independent artist and then have a world of trouble because somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, hey, I wrote that bridge, you know, or so that is their worst nightmare. And that's my job to make sure that that never happens.
So no samples usually. If I'm an artist and I'm delivering to you, as artists should know, right? Unless it's cleared, when you meet your rep, you should give them something with no samples. It'll help your progress. It'll help you get to the finish line quicker.
How does it work with people that are using like this new, you know, there's all these sort of splice type programs where like you can grab and this type of stuff. Is that stuff allowed to be on TV?
That is allowed to be on TV. If you pay for, if you properly do it through Splice, or you have a loop CD or something like that, that is okay. You are allowed to license that, and you don't have to go back to Splice to get permission. It's interesting because we just went through this with a bunch of artists that we're representing. Some of them were actually produced by WireFang, and some of the guys had used some Splice stuff. And we actually got a hold of, we talked to somebody at Splice and said seems to be, two different, trains of thought here, that if there's a sample, not a sample, but if there's a Splice loop, if you want to license it, you have to go to that creator and get permission. You don't have to. Now, if your song has a James Brown sample in it, for example, and you've cleared it, you probably have only cleared it for digital streaming, right? When you go to place something, every writer, whoever that is, has to give you permission to be on that show for that placement. That's the one thing that is often misunderstood. So for an independent artist, yeah, we usually say it's way better off if there's no samples on at your level, right? Because the thing about it is, if they're trying to license a real big song, they're going after a Kanye West song, and there are samples in it, the show, the network will take the time to go clear it with everybody, right? But if they're dealing with an independent artist over a $5,000 license, they don't want to have to go and contact the James Brown representatives, for example, and start negotiating with them, right? It just gets too hectic, too complicated. So
I think there's like a very interesting aspect that, like, I'm gonna I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I just think like this needs to be said. I mean, back in my day, and I'm sure we're close to the same age, all of us in here. I don't know how old WireFang is, but back in the day,
I'm not sure WireFang knows how old WireFang is. That's just my feeling.
But back in the day, a song, if you go really far back, you'd have to wait for that song to come on the radio. You'd get lucky to tape it. Songs had long shelf lives. Songs could be a hit for 52 weeks. You could have the same song because there wasn't access to it like there's, unless you went and bought the album or the CD. There was no way to hear that record unless it was on the radio or MTV or something like that, or you taped it on a little cassette. And nowadays, there are still some breakthrough songs. I'm not going to, of course, there's still like exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, a shelf life for a song is very short. People who can find any song at any time and like play the shit out of it in 3 days, the song gets old very quickly. And I'm saying that what you do is sort of indirectly it's sort of a preservation for music too, because you're saying that there is more than a shelf life on Spotify. There's a shelf life that exists within this new avenues to put songs in television and movies. And, a song that was made 15 years ago could show up again in this movie in 2025.
Yep. No, you're right. I mean, look, I represent artists that aren't actually together anymore, that made an album 15 years ago that was great, right? But for whatever reason, it didn't do anything, or sometimes they didn't even put it out, right? So look, I get a lot of thrill out of being able to tell those artists, like, hey, I placed one of your songs, and they feel validated, like, hey, it's out there getting some attention and something, and somebody's enjoying it. And you're right, in a way, it's out in the public, being represented in some sort of way. That's great. I love when I can do that, especially older stuff that, like I said, is good. And for whatever reason, it didn't sell, it didn't come out. There's so much stuff, as you would imagine, everywhere, right?
What John? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask one quick thing. So, like back when you first started out, like I have some friends that are in the placement game too. Like the guys that he's not there anymore, but he started Jingle Punks a long time ago, and he used to be an editor. So, like that's how he sort of figured that out. He was like, "Well, if I'm picking these songs, why can't I find an easier sort of application?" Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But my point is that back when you first kind of started out, it was like anybody who had like beats in their computer could people were just looking to fill catalogs and fill things with songs, and that's changed. Like quality has come back. It's come full circle again where, everybody has beats now, and you don't want just beats anymore. You want songs and good songs. It's not like as simple as, I used to have a show on MTV, and like there would be the same cues you heard on our show is the same one you heard on this cooking channel show and the same one you heard on this Wives of Atlanta show. It was the same sort of library being hit up, but it's not really like that anymore. So people out there who are like firing off 20 beats thinking, oh, I'll send it to Jeff Stiegel and now I'm going to be rich. It's not like that. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. Interestingly enough, 20 years ago, the music that was being licensed was not as good as it is today. One of the biggest reasons was, like I said, I mentioned it earlier, that bigger artists didn't want to license to TV and film. That was seen as like low end, right? Like really, you need a license to, this show or whatever, because you can't sell records anymore. That changed, right? Yeah. When CD stopped selling and there wasn't, Spotify yet, and there were there was like 8 years or 10 years, maybe even a lot of dryness, right? When it was just music was being downloaded and nobody was paying for it. Everybody decided, well, let's do more into sync because they're actually still paying money there. So the quality started going through the roof, right? You had artists who would never license, all of a sudden license.
Right. And did that coincide at all? And I don't know if I'm just being like a conspiracy theorist here, but Michael Jackson passed away. And I think like right after he passed away, you started seeing Beatles songs and Michael Jackson songs like show up in places that you would have never seen him before. Like, I don't know if that like directly correlates with what you're talking about, but that had to have some influence on other artists who were watching a commercial and were like, wait a minute, that's a Rolling Stones song. Like they never put songs in commercials.
Well, yeah. So I think it went this way. Every artist over the last 15, 20 years makes less money from record sales than they did, let's say, in the 90s. Every single one of them, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I was reading something, even Metallica was complaining about it because someone said, you guys are on the road a lot, playing a lot. It's like, yeah, well, we don't make money from album sales like we used to, so you got to make it up somehow. So everybody took that hit. So the money coming from sync became more alluring, and you heard you heard big bands, and when you hear those bigger bands, I think it starts to drag everybody in,
Yeah, like all of a sudden, like the Eagles are like, well, we're missing out on a payday. Let us in.
Well, listen, what I want to ask you before you go is the syncs. What genre of music do you have the most success syncing, and what type of media? Whether it be commercials, is it movies, is it sports games and stuff like that? Which genre of music, and then on the flip side, what media do you combine it with?
Probably. So let me think about that for a second. Okay. I would say right now the two genres.
Hip hop's got to be number one.
Well, okay, so I think hip hop and pop is probably the genres. Now we represent everything. I signed a bluegrass band a couple weeks ago. I told these guys, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to place you because I don't get a lot of requests for it, but I'm happy to have you because.
Yeah, but all it takes is that one bluegrass call, and it's like.
We are the leaders in bluegrass licensing as we speak right now. So just if there's any supervisors watching, where to find bluegrass. I would say of the last couple of years, our most successful genres are pop and hip hop. Probably both of those.
And on the flip side, What are they going to? Reality TV? Are they going to events? What is it going to?
Dramatic television, I guess, is what I would
It's
say.
the number one.
Is a number one. Yeah, hip hop is doing really well it's just cool to see that hip hop has, become so mainstream that we've licensed a couple of hip hop tracks to Animal Kingdom. Hip hop is in everything now, right?
It's universal now,
which is great, because it opens it up to, every show, and I love that. Hip hop has obviously, I mean, you guys know what hip hop has, but especially for a dramatic show, it just got that grit and that energy and that push, right? Because ultimately in sync, what we do is music that serves an emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, hip hop just has that charge to it. So it's been doing really, really well. And we've been having some success lately. And then pop is pop, right? I mean, pop always does well. There's always.
How does it work with covers? Because I see a lot of these, like specifically like, some of these movies, you see like some really, some broken down version of some song with like a creepy kind of melodic version of an old hit song.
That got very
all the time. So
it got very popular to have like an old classic rock song redone with a girl with a very ethereal voice, and it's like a massive attack kind of feel to it.
Right.
Here's how it works. If you own the master, right, there's two parts to licensing. There's the publishing, who are the songwriters, and then there's the master, which is the recording. If you cover, I don't know, a Beatles song, let's say, you can license your recording for whatever you want, but the show still has to go to the Beatles representative. So you still have to go to, their camp to get the rights to do that, right? Just because you covered a song does not mean
yours.
Right. So
what about like, how does it work on like songs that are older than a certain amount of years are like fair game? Like, what's that rule?
If something has come into the public domain, you can license it for nothing. The publishing side, right? The recording probably is still owned by a company, right? Because a recording is, recordings going into the public domain are kind of a different thing. And to be honest with you, I don't understand all the levels of that. But publishing, if something comes into the public domain, and there are some things in the public domain, you can license it and you don't have to pay anything for the publishing side of it.
Classical music? Like if I make a rap song and I have
exactly music, yep. We represent a bunch of classical music. So typically, let's say it's a piece written by Beethoven. You have to pay us for the recording, but the publishing side, you don't have to pay anything for.
So what is the actual years? Like songs that are 50 years old? Like when does something become public domain? Do you know?
Yes. 90 years after the last writer's death is where it is right now.
Wow, that's way. I thought it was like a 50-year thing, so it's way.
It used to be 30, 50, 70, and you know who's leading the charge in extending that is the Disney Corporation, because Mickey Mouse was like 5 years from becoming public domain, because it was like he's been dead for, it was like 50 years since he'd been dead. So Disney has gone to Congress and say, if we lose the copyright, Mickey Mouse, okay? See, even WireFang knows. Look, he's shaking. So, think about think about every shirt, mug, keychain that they stick that, thing on. So they have been continually pushing it, so it's more and more time so that they can keep that copyright.
Wow, I did not know that. So 90 years after the last writer's death.
90 years after the last author's death, right? Because if it's a song that had, if it's a Beatles song, let's say that it's McCartney and Lennon, obviously Lennon is is gone.
Have to wait till 2070. Oh no, even more, because
90 years, right?
It's not
90 years after Paul McCartney dies, then the Beatles songs will come into the public.
I guess Ringo, he didn't write too many songs, so it's Paul.
Ringo. It doesn't count for drumming. His drumming was good, but
that's another thing, though. Let's talk about drums for a second.
Let's talk about drums for a second.
A lot of hip hop is based. Some of the best hip hop, especially the stuff that me and Neff like, is based off of old school drum breaks and stuff that people recorded. Now, that used to be fair game? Is it still fair game?
No.
Wow.
It is unfair game. Yeah, in the early days of hip hop, people were using other people's recordings and not paying them. The Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, was like the height of sampling without paying anybody. That record would have never been made, and it's in a way it's interesting because it's a brilliant record, I think. But they used so many samples on it, and expensive samples too. So now, if you want to license something and you're using a sample, let's say of a drum break, you've got to make a deal with the publisher, and you've got to make a deal with whoever owns the master, right?
So somebody can be like, no, that's my drum beat. And how would they know? If it's just like, it has to be like a distinguishable thing, or?
Well, you can always try to get away with it, but I think at this point, most people would not recommend it because there are legal ramifications that you really don't want to deal with.
Right.
I mean, if it gets popular enough, somebody is going to figure it out. I guarantee you, if the song doesn't ever do anything, then you're probably fine.
So even like the one, like there's like that classic drum break from that was used a million times.
Impeach the president. That's what you talk about.
I guess it's like.
That's it.
Milli Vanilli used it. Eric B. and Rakim used it. Da 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 da.
Is that the Amen break?
It could be.
There's one from I think it's a song. I can't remember who did it, but it's a great drum break, and everybody's used it from NWA to Nas. But
when you're talking about, it's not. I'm gonna find the one that I'm.
Okay, but here's the interesting thing about drum breaks. So James Brown's main drummer was a guy named Stubblefield, I think it is, right? Amazing funk drummer. When you go to even though you're just using the drum break, he didn't write any of the James Brown songs. So James Brown gets all the money for that and makes the decision.
Oh, shit.
So I think there's actually, if you go online, there's a documentary about, can't remember his first name, but Stubblefield is his last name, about how, he's on more hip hop than anybody in the early days, and he didn't get a penny for it. James Brown got all that money. Even if you're not using, if you're only using the drums in the beginning of Funky Drummer, right? James Brown gets all of that. That's sort of how publishing works in the United States.
And I think, that's how it was for many years. I mean, you look at the Beatles records, Lennon McCartney, you look at Rolling Stones, Jagger Richards, the other band members probably contributed a lot to these songs, but they're not getting the writing. And then, a band that I reference all the time because I'm a nerd and I love them, but Toto was one of those bands that gave everybody, the drummer's incredible, but he's got a writing thing.
Yeah.
It's like those bands that did it like that. But most bands didn't protect their own.
Well, you got to remember this too. Yeah. These days, you'll find that most bands are giving everybody in the band at least some part of the publishing, right? There's certainly the main there's the main songwriters, right? But you got to remember, like back in James Brown or the Beatles or Rolling Stones, it wasn't as much that they were trying to be. No one thought in 50 years, right, that somebody's going to come and want to get the drum break in the beginning of Funky Drummer, right? Most of these acts, you could see early interviews of like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, and they're like, if we could do this for a couple of years, it would be great, Ringo Starr wanted to buy a hair salon with the money that he was, you know, you would have told those guys 50, 60 years from now, people are still good. They're like, come on, what are you talking about? This is pop. It's disposable. Nobody cares about it, right?
Plus, also back then, you know, you had all these great session musicians that just got paid. Come in the studio. Here's $500. Come play the guitar, and like no publishing. It's like
Well, you know what? We have a weird system. So there's a problem in the United States, and the problem is this: our publishing laws were made and set to work with piano rolls, right? That was the first, you know, musical devices ever sold. So when you sold piano rolls, it was just the song. There was no artist. And that's why there isn't a lot of, like, you know, sort of areas for the drummer to make money, right? You either write the song or you don't write the song, and that's it, right? And listen, the drummer for James Brown deserves some money.
For sure. What do you mean? The most breaks of anybody. We're running out of time here, but I want to play this. This is the drum thing I was talking about. This one.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's full. Rakim.
That's on everything.
That's been. What's it originally from? Do you know? Do you have that?
Soul Searchers. It's like some 70s.
Is that Kill the President?
Yeah, it's the Soul Searchers.
No, it's not Impeach, is it?
Roach clip. I looked. It's hold on, I'll find out what other songs it's on.
I love that old stuff. I love finding, you know, information about. There's a decent documentary about what's it called? I can't remember it anymore. But the Amazing Bongo Band. Does that ring a bell? That's another record. It's an instrumental record made like in the 70s. And if you hear the songs, you'll immediately go, oh, okay, I can name 7 hip hop songs right away that use that drum break, right?
Okay, so the break that I just played you has been used in 466 songs.
Is that a lot? I'm not an accountant. I mean, that's nearly 500 songs.
Use that same drum, and we're talking about like Eric B. and Rakim, Slick Rick, PM Dawn, Milli Vanilli, Run DMC, LL Cool J, etc., etc. Duran Duran, Jay Dilla, the Ghetto Boys, DMX.
I would like to say Rakim was first.
Or Rakim was the best, right? Let's face it.
He was first.
He was first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Milli Vanilli probably sold more records.
Probably.
And I think that once Millie uses it, that gives it the credibility that allows someone like a Rakim then to move in and say, hey, I can use, if Millie has this, I got it, you know.
Sure. This has been a lot of fun, man. And
likewise.
Obviously, we're just getting going, so we'd love to do this again because I'm sure we just scratched the surface. And there's other things to talk to you about, but this was good to get a introduction. There's people that listen to this show that they want to know these things, and you're sort of a gatekeeper in a lot of ways. So people can check out fundamental_music. That's the social handle. But don't bother Jeff Siegel. Hit up WireFang so that he can get a piece of the action on the submission.
In fact, show up at WireFang's house if you can. If you're ever visiting Germany, you're in Dusseldorf. Look at him; he's already excited. Hey guys, I had a great time doing this, and anytime.
Before you go, though, we are never thirsty here because being thirsty is a sign of desperation, and we live in a time where you can like have a drink and not be thirsty. So, what is the beverage that you prefer so that you're never thirsty?
You know, I got to be honest, guys. I'm looking around my house, and I guess it's water. I'm a little boring, you know. Sparklets.
By the way, the price is right on water.
So that's right. That's right. We do like that price.
Thank you so much for hanging with us. We're going to
I had a good time, guys. A lot of fun.
Yes. Talk to you, man.
Never thirsty.